Hello, and welcome to the first in a series of podcasts brought to you by the IIBA. My name is Amy Riddell. I'm the editor-in-chief of Project Times, BA Times, and I'm so pleased to welcome you here today. We're going to be talking about the current state of Agile and understand if Agile is continuing to pick up steam and if it's here to stay. I'm very happy to introduce you to our guest today, Steve Blais. Steve is a PMP and has over 43 years experience in business analysis, project management, and software development. He provides consulting services to companies developing business analysis processes, and he's on the committee for the IIBA's Babok Guide 3.0. He is the author of Business Analysis Best Practices for Success. Welcome, Steve.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, let's get straight to the questions because we have a lot to cover today. Let's start off with this. What is the current state of Agile?
Well, it's still evolving. In fact, I doubt if anybody could really define the current state of Agile, and that's not a bad thing. If you could define the current state and had a current state, that would not necessarily be Agile. So the evolution, the continuous evolving, and it will continue to evolve, is really an Agile application of Agile. If we reached a plateau where we could, say, pronounce that, by George, the industry is now Agile, or our organization is now Agile, or our software development is now Agile, then probably we're not being Agile. Agile is about continuous process improvement. So if we stop changing Agile, we stop evolving, then we're really not being Agile anymore. And it's kind of like a Zen koan, where if you do something, you can't get the results. Now, Agile originally was in software development, of course, coming from a whole bunch of very expert and experienced software developers writing the manifesto. But it's moved from methods and procedures and processes to get away from the classic way of doing software to a kind of mindset that an entire organization can embrace. So Agile's moved out of the programming room, out of the development room, and into the entire organizations, and many organizations are exactly doing that. Now, see, when you consider that the concept of Agile is responsiveness, flexibility, it's kind of attractive to have a method, a way, a mindset to get the organization more flexible enough to respond to market changes quickly. This concept, this desire has been around for decades. The difference now, what's causing organizations to suddenly kind of jump into it, is that we have a name. We have a kind of a banner. We can put a fix on the whole concept. And so the ideas are moving out of the IT world, out of the programming world, out of the software development world, and into all aspects of the organization.
Okay, that's interesting. So to what extent would you say are organizations today embracing Agile?
Well, I would say that we're probably at the late adopter stage. This is the point that there are probably teams out there that are practicing some form of Agile, such as Scrum or SAFe or any of them, in any organization anywhere. All organizations will have some spot of Agile software development going on. Now, the whole organization may not be embracing Agile at this point, especially, of course, the larger organizations. But within organizations, there will be projects that will use, or at least say they use, one of the Agile software development methods. Now, several of the companies that I have worked with have gone so far as to add an agile software development lifecycle framework to their existing software development lifecycle frameworks as an alternative. And that way the organization can maintain control of the process and allow the agile software development to go on. And what I've observed is in many cases they were already doing agile, and management just decided to, well, if you can't beat them, let's join them, and they create a pretty picture and write up some documents, and it becomes the agile alternative. The process there of creating a framework and having it basically committed to the standards committee is not really very agile in itself. It kind of violates the basic first tenet of the Agile Manifesto. However, what's important about it is that even the largest organizations and even the most conservative organizations are beginning or have already endorsed Agile as a software development approach.
In your view, why is Agile so popular?
Well, certainly among developers it is popular because it basically gives us more autonomy. Now, when I was a developer 50 years ago, I would most likely have somebody managing me who was not only never a developer, but probably didn't know that much about computers. I worked for the United States Marine Corps when I first started out of college, and instead of doing computer science, we were doing business computing, business programming. And my boss was a lieutenant who had just returned from the Vietnam War and knew nothing about computers. And that's the way it was for years. So we were managed in the structure and management of a corporation with no regard for the differences and the different way, the different people we were. We're not the usual people, corporate people. So we really embraced Agile because we could gain our own autonomy as a team. We could work in a team. When I started out, I was in an office by myself, and I maybe talked to people once a day at most. Agile is about a team, everybody working together. And so the idea is that you want the people to manage who are the people who are doing. Have the team make the decisions on what is going to be done, what part of this big piece of software we have to write, what part of it we're going to do in the next 2 weeks, and how we're going to do it.
How do you see the role of Agile evolving moving forward?
Well, as I said, there's always something new that comes along, and Agile is continually evolving. And maybe someday Agile, and actually I shouldn't even say maybe, someday, without doubt, Agile will be as legacy as the current non-Agile systems, the current traditional kind of linear or staged approaches. Agile will be just as old-fashioned, and people using the new whatever it might be will scoff at the old guys just the way the Agile zealots scoffed at the old guys with their old programming. Now, one of the things I've been watching for the past, well, it hasn't been 50 years, it's only been about over 40, because in the early 70s, I recall, and that is that there may be in the near future, maybe 20 years or less, a non-developer world. That is to say, no developers. And you might say, well, hey, no developers, no business analysts, because the business analysts are writing the requirements for the developers. Well, when I was a programmer back in the 70s, we were working with 4GLs, fourth generation languages, and other tools that were advertised and ballyhooed by the vendors as getting rid of programmers. You don't need any programmers if you use our language. And of course, I was a programmer, and we were using those languages. It did not take off. And it could have been. I mean, the business people could actually. It was very simple. COBOL is straightforward. It was designed initially for business people to write their own code, and these 4GLs were even easier to do. A lot of almost cut and paste stuff. Of course, back then you didn't have graphical user interfaces. It comes to mind that back in the mid-'70s, and it's a while ago, a now defunct company, I don't know when they went out of business, but at the time there was MAI Basic 4 was the name of it, and they had Basic 4 computers. That was the name of the computers. And what they did was come out with a configurable general ledger and accounting system with inventory, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and all of that for mid-sized businesses. No programming. You buy the package and use the software as it came to them, and the tailoring you do is done through configuring the system. How many characters do you want in your general ledger number? The package itself was less expensive because there was no programming, and less expensive for to buy, and then less expensive for the customers because they didn't have to pay for any programming and then long-term maintenance and so forth. Now the company Basic 4 also had several Basic 4 models, which were standard mini-computer models that required programming. And I got to tell you that we made a lot of money in those days programming computers for small businesses who didn't want that packaged solution. They wanted us to come in and program on the Basic 4 because they believed they were unique and required special software. And the funny part about it is that we used the same basic general ledger system, which I designed and built, for all the companies. And we just modified it according to their special characteristics. A heating and air conditioning company versus a helicopter parts company, and an adult game maker, a prosthetics designer and builder, a rag warehouse. All of these use the same general ledger system, and yet they would rather have us come in and put their name on it and so forth and make the modifications to it than buy something that already had a general ledger system in it. And the really ironic part is that we also made money coming into companies that bought the programmer-less accounting packages. You say, well, did you program? No, we couldn't program it. There was nothing to program. You couldn't break it to a command language. But the companies asked us to come in, talk to the business, and do the configuration. A programmer-less system, and yet we were there as programmers to do the configuration. So I see the future having true programmer-less software, packages that people can buy, configure, and do it themselves. And business people being able to do their own programming, as it were. And that is a great opportunity. And in fact, I think the main person in that is going to be the business analyst, because the business analyst will be called in to do what we did back in the 70s, ask the questions, get the information, and do the configuration, create new reports and so forth. Because ultimately, in the end, all those business people who are perfectly capable of doing the configuration and creating the systems themselves don't want to do it.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because I was just going to ask you where the business analysis professional fits within Agile.
Well, that's the idea. Is that I see them in the future picking up a lot of that slack, that gap between the business people who don't want to do it and the system that needs to be done.
Should all BAs be embracing Agile?
All? Absolutely. All business analysts should embrace some Agile, even if they're not working with software development. If they're doing other things, all business analysts should embrace Agile, and frankly, should have been embracing it all along.
Well, what's the value that can be derived from that?
Well, first of all, I'm not talking about jumping into an Agile approach such as Scrum or SAFe or any of those. I'm talking about a business analyst being agile in all activities and endeavors, whether you're involved with Agile software development, traditional software development, or not even involved with software development at all. As I said earlier, responsiveness and flexibility. And that's a core element of the business analyst profession. The experienced and successful, the professional business analyst is also agile. The successful business analyst works with people to make improvements rather than working with the processes. The professional business analyst is focused on solving a business problem rather than producing documentation. The professional business analyst deals with integrity and personal agreements rather than enforcing contracts and responds to change instead of mechanically following a plan. In other words, even though the Agile Manifesto was written for software development, those 4 tenets, those 4 principles certainly apply to all business analysis.
Well, how are the skills that are required by an Agile BA aligned or different than the skills required by a traditional business analysis professional?
Well, in theory, there probably aren't that many differences between Agile business analyst and a traditional business analyst. And again, I'm talking about business analysts in general, not necessarily working on the software development. The business analyst still has to elicit information from the business community, define the business problem, elicit more information to determine what solution might be appropriate, and then once a solution is selected by the business, get the details of how to implement that solution.
Well, how can the BA harness the power of Agile?
Well, it's primarily an issue of mindset. It's how the business analyst thinks about work and how the business analyst does it. See, in traditional business analysis, the work is done more independently. The business analyst has to go to a lot of meetings with the business people and typically does this alone. Occasionally, maybe a project manager. Certainly, the solution development team doesn't come along. And then when they go into analysis to analyze the information they gathered, that's also a fairly solo job. And in many cases, the business analyst may produce a set of requirements without ever actually talking or meeting with the software development team at all, the very people who are going to implement those requirements. Now, even in the traditional approach, a more agile business analyst is going to be working with a team on a constant basis. The team can provide additional eyes and ears to help the analysis of the information. They can help the business analyst document requirements in a way that they can better understand. It just makes sense. Even in a non-agile software development environment, the agile business analyst will take the initiative to meet with the software development team in some fashion. If you're not face-to-face, if you're not co-located, you got email or teleconferences, which are better. Video conferences like Skype is even better. The agile business analyst is involved with the solution team as much as they can. That's the first thing I would suggest to make yourself more agile. Now, if you're working with an agile software development mode, your team is Scrum and you're working on that team, The main thing, the thing that you got to remember is that the business analyst then becomes part of the team. And you're no longer a solo practitioner. You are now a member of the team. And the business analyst is also asked to kind of adjust their approach. Instead of defining a total solution, they've got to break it down into small components like user stories or backlog items. They've got to build the definition of just what's going to be implemented in the next time box. Now, that's very different for a lot of business analysts who kind of like to see the whole picture. And this is a risk, right? You don't know what the whole product is going to look like if you're dealing with 2 weeks at a time, and it might take a year to build the whole thing. And there's a lot of uncertainty involved with that, and it's perhaps frightening to many business analysts who really want to know what that whole picture looks like. If the business analyst is kind of used to having a complete solution laid out in their job, and that their job is to detail it for the solution team, there's going to be a major change in their mindset. It's easy. It's not that difficult. You start with a problem statement and a vision of what the solution looks like, which comes first, and then a lot of business analysts don't do that, and I recommend it highly. And then identify the major functions that have to be done, and then take them one at a time, keeping your view on that vision. Now, there will be some business analysts, especially those who have been working as business analysts for decades, they may find the tradition to be particularly difficult because of that very large amount of uncertainty, which kind of brings to mind a quote by Ray Bradbury, the science fiction author, said that sometimes you have to jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down.
It's a good one. We have time for one more question, so let's leave off on this one. What advice would you give to a BA looking to move into the Agile space?
Well, I'd give advice to all BAs, whether you're moving into the Agile space or not, to look at what Agile is about and see how you can adopt the Agile tenets, the Agile activities to make yourself more Agile, even if you're not working with an Agile team. The more Agile you are, the more problem-solving you become, the more adept you are at seeing the big picture and being able to break it down into small problems to solve. That's going to advance your career and yourself and, of course, help the company. Moving into an Agile team, the main thing is to remember your job is not to run away and go find requirements and bring them back. Your job is to work with the team. And in fact, in Scrum, you will be another developer. And you may be even called on to write some code or do some testing because that's the idea of the team. If you keep in mind two things, they will help you whether you're in Scrum, Safe, Kanban, or whatever. Always solve the problem. Make sure you've defined the right problem and then go about to do what is necessary to solve it.
Okay, well, Steve, that's all the time we have today. Are there any closing comments?
I think I've covered the ground there.
I think you have, and it was fantastic. Thank you so much for being our guest today. I'd also like to thank the IIBA for bringing this presentation to you. As I said, this is the first in a series that will be running throughout the fall, so please check back and see what we have next on deck. So on behalf of the team here, thank you so much, and thank you so much, Steve, for being with us today.